Hi, Monica.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Hey, Monica.
Hi, Randy. Hi, Jakai. Who all's here?
Phone. And Monica, where are you beaming in from tonight?
I'm beaming in from Algonquin lands. That's the border between Ontario and Quebec.
All
Right by the
right.
Lower River.
Hoo-hoo. Like, what's the closest big town?
Ottawa is 2 hours away,
Oh,
our
okay.
capital city. Oh, I didn't write it correctly.
And the Weatheros are in Albuquerque now.
Yeah.
Or Las Lunas, I
They're
think.
about.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, awesome. Have a nice trip down?
We had a good trip. We had a couple of detours. We got detoured in Rawlings, Wyoming, because the wind was too high. So I got to detour north. So I got to see Casper and a lot of country between Rawlings and Casper, and then back down. But yeah, everything else went well.
All right.
Okay.
When do you leave on your trip here?
That's a good question. I don't know yet. South Africa and the airlines and the flights there, it's to be determined. Probably March into March.
Okay.
Best guess right now.
All right. So if you're up for it, I'll make a trip down there just to say hi here.
Hey, we'd love it. Or we can come up to you to do coffee, whatever. What are the current restrictions now?
Yeah, we're on a yellow now, so we can go to restaurants and that now.
Oh, we'd love that.
Yeah. All right. I'll talk to you later on that.
Okay.
All right, Casey, I think you're going to be the opener. I'm starting the live stream, so it'll be up in a couple seconds here.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, we're live.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Glad you could join us tonight with Good Medicine Way here on Monday nights, Albuquerque time. Always good to see everyone who shows up and listens in. We got a special guest with us coming up here real soon. We got to give him as much time as we can here. So I'll open us with prayer and acknowledge the land that we're on here. Here in the Southwest, it's a land of many different peoples here. The Navajo, the Hopi, the Apache, and the various pueblos that we have in our area here. And the land we're on close to us here is the Sandia Pueblo tribe. And we recognize that and know that we are guests in their land. Here in Albuquerque, we're a land of many tribes, over 127 different tribes recognized here in just the city limits of Albuquerque, among the almost 47,000 natives that are here. So we recognize that. So we pray right now, Lord, for the four directions. So all you are in every direction, and we acknowledge that you're in the east, the south, the west, and the north. You are in the earth, you are in the sky. And as believers in your Son, Jesus Christ, you are also in us. We give this time to you this evening, and we recognize your glory. And we ask it in Jesus' name. As we give this time right now, we are a special guest with us going to talk about Lenten time in a contextual way. Our friend and brother, Randy Woodley here is joining us for a short time. I know that he has to leave quickly, so we want to give him some time to introduce his Lenten service that he and some of our colleagues, Joshua and Aaron Hackett, has put together. And we just give him this time now. So Randy, take it away.
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me questions because I'm probably, I can tell you why I'm the worst person to introduce it. So, so let me start by saying how it came about. So Edith and I both come from Baptist backgrounds, and neither of us had Lent in our religious backgrounds when we were growing up, or understood what that's about. And so I had Erna Kim Hackett is one of the Nate's graduates, and Joshua Grace, and they contacted me and said, "Hey, what about putting together a Lenten devotional for Lenten season?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah. Like, do it from some of like your writings that you've written. You've got stuff written all over the place, and articles and chapters, and just pick out little nuggets and let's talk about a Lenten journey to creation." And I thought, well, that's good, and we could talk about why I think that's good. But when we were done, I went to my wife and I said, "Now, what was Lent about?" And so we had to Google it, right? So, so for me to introduce it is a little bit awkward because I'm not a Lenten guy. But now that I understand it, it's kind of like a 40-day devotional toward the cross and toward Jesus and all of, the Easter season stuff. So, okay, so I get that. That's great. So now I understand, looking back, that she means let's look at what I would say is Jesus as creator. So the Bible is very clear that in John chapter 1, Colossians chapter 1, Hebrews chapter 1, in 1 Corinthians, did I say Colossians? Yeah. So there's a lot of places where they were like, what do we, how do we think about Jesus? He wasn't just born. And so what they said was, like Jesus is equal to God. Jesus is creator. And then in these scriptures, all of these scriptures say that Jesus was the actual creator. And like of creation, right? Of the creation that we love and enjoy. And so, and it's without a doubt, it's emphatic. It's like there's nobody questioning that, like John 1, chapter 1, where it says, like, he made everything that was made, and without him, nothing was made that was made. It was pretty clear. And then in Colossians 1, you get like, he made everything and he holds everything together. And so the same creator who our people have been praying to since time immemorial is Jesus. And so, well, why not take a look at him then from creation? Because the scriptures are full of the kinds of things that God feels about creation. And so so that's how this thing came about. And so we wanted to link for people, we wanted to link Jesus to creation so that they could have maybe a fuller understanding. Because in the Western church, they've had a hard time, number one, kind of with Jesus as creator. I mean, there's not much written out there about it, and there's not, much solid what they would call doctrine and theology about it. And it's very plain, right? There's no doubt about it. And I think it's a problem because of a little bit of our imbalance. So when people say to me, like, like the cross is the most important thing, I'm like, no. You know what? It's important. Incarnation is important. Jesus' life is important. How he lived, who he lived with, what he taught, his teachings are important, his death is important, and his resurrection is important. They're all important. And when we emphasize one over everything else, we get a very kind of imbalanced, I think, theology. And so what we try to do in putting this thing together was to say, now Jesus is a whole lot bigger than, what we might sometimes think in our sort of puny minds and puny theologies. And so that's kind of how all that came together and the purpose of it. And yeah.
Mhm.
Very cool. So let me share my screen here real quick. And so this is what the devotional looks like. This is the cover for it. Drawing closer to creator and creation. And how you get it is if you go to elohe.org, that's how it's spelled there, and click a few boxes there, and then they'll give you the download link for it. And we're encouraging everyone who is part of, who comes to our Good Medicine Way gatherings here, to go through this devotional. We're all going to be going through it. And then each week, we're going to highlight a thought or a section from the devotional. So we encourage you all to head over to elohe.org. That's ELOHEH.org. And get your Drawing Closer to Creator and Creation, an Indigenous Journey Through Lent devotional. It'll be great.
Yeah, I put the link right there on the Good Medicine Way wall. If you just scroll down a little bit. All right.
Yeah. So I never heard it pronounced Elohe, but that's okay. I mean, because people
Hey.
remember it's an E, but we say Elohe,
Elohe. Okay. Sorry.
Elohe.
That's my
It's okay.
my whiteness showing through.
Like the Fonz.
No.
Hey.
It's fine.
Well, thank you guys. I'd just like to fill you a little history, and Randy and I go back a little ways here. Back when we were a little bit younger, I remember him when he was in Carson City working out there, and then got to meet him when I first moved down here to Albuquerque. He and his family were packed up like the Beverly Hillbillies on a trailer and car. And they were all little kids, and I expect to see Randy sitting on a rocking chair on top of all of that. And they were heading cross country to make a big move to the East Coast. And ever since that time, we grew as family over the years, and we got to work together many times. And then with the Wachoni Family Camp and other things that we were involved in, we just became brothers. I know our kids they just recognized each other as brothers and sisters. They were just growing up together, along with other family members like Cheryl Bear's boys and that. And so Randy and I have had good relations, and can call on him for advice and talk and share. And he's a wealth of information, and I open to that for him too. And we look forward to more of your work, Randy. And look.
Thanks. So, yeah. So a couple things I wanted to say in response to that, if I can. One is that I think you actually know the day that happened because your last child was born later that day. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that day. Yeah, we're in May. Yeah, we had a daughter here in May. It came through.
Yeah, and we just drove and kind of met each other and talked, and real quick, and you had a lot going on. So, but a couple things. I came to know Jesus in your country, at a place called Camp Cascatoa, not far from where you're from.
Right.
And it was an Ojibwe guy who led me to Jesus. And then of course you led my headdress ceremony. There was an Ojibwe headdress and Ojibwe headdress ceremony, and so you led me out. So yeah, we have some real connections there. And I still think of myself as in a lot of ways as a Michigander and someone who has a debt to the Anishinaabe peoples. So.
All right. Well, good. I know when I read your introduction, it just took me back to growing up there in Michigan with all the smells and all the feel and the different seasons that are there. Enjoy your writing very much. And anyone else that would like to read various books about the Native culture and perspective, Randy's got several books out there that you can check into. It's just amazing. I remember before I even wrote a book, I was talking with Randy while I was on a walk here on the phone, and he said, Case, you're going to write a book. Don't worry about it. It's going to be coming. Just don't worry about it. And from that time on, it came, and I've been able to share some of my thoughts and vision for ministry over the years. And I appreciate you, Randy, and you're good people. Love you.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm sorry I have to go so quick, but I have a class I have to lead tonight. So.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Okay. Later on.
Thank you, James.
Next. All right. Well, this week in Native America, doing a slightly special or different segment since it's President's Day. And obviously in America, presidents and Native Americans haven't gone so well together with assimilation and land removal, but Indians are obviously not gone. Native Americans have fought, and just touching on a few highlights of events that have happened with presidents the last few administrations. Currently with Joe Biden, he's just appointed Deb Haaland recently, our own New Mexican Native gal, to be the Secretary of the Interior. Much hope for that with Earth Care. And the president before that, Trump, has opened a case for murdered and missing, or a building for murdered and missing Indigenous women cold cases in Minnesota to be, gotten to the bottom of there. And the administration before that, President Obama, Eloise Cobell, a Blackfeet woman, made a case to try to advocate for natives to get the gas and oil money that had been defrauded to them, or for about 100 years, and she won. Obama awarded her about $4 billion, and monies from that still are in the form of scholarships at UNM here, where I'm going to school. So that was, I think, the biggest class action lawsuit settlement of that kind. So hopeful for more and more good relationships between presidents and Native Americans. So now a couple songs for you.
All right. So hopefully this will all work out. We changing things up here a little bit because we wanted to try to incorporate some non-acoustic stuff. So hopefully it'll all sound okay. But we're going to do a song that Leah adopted from the Psalms and put to the tune of Cheryl Bear's Lord's Prayer song.
And it's called Taste and See. God meets us more than halfway. He frees us from our anxious fear. Taste and see, Creator's good. Taste and see, Creator's good. Look at Him. Give Him your warmest smile. Never hide your feelings from Him. Taste and see, Creator's good. Taste and see, Creator's good. When I was desperate, I called out. God got me out of a tight spot. Taste and see, Creator's good. Taste and see, Creator's good. God Tasted, see Creator's good. Join me in spreading the news. Together, let's get the word out. Yes, now, join me in spreading the news. Together, let's get the word out. Taste and see Creator's good. Blessed are all who run to Him. Taste and see Creator's good. Blessed are all who run to Him.
Okay.
That was great.
Okay.
Back to my rock and roll days.
Yeah. Got to get that 70s Jesus movement vibe going, you know.
There we go. I'm all for it.
All right. So now we're going to do Ganaronkwa by Jonathan Miracle. Ganaronkwa in Mohawk means I love you, or that general sentiment. So basically the words is Jesus, we love you, and hooting and hollering about all that and how Jesus is good medicine. Yes, yes, yes,
right, turning it over to Heather Jim for land acknowledgement or creation insights.
Oh, here she comes. All right, you're still muted, Heather.
Oh my gosh, really? I guess Zoom wanted me to do the phone version of unmuting myself instead of the app. Well, I was gonna say hi. I'm Heather here. I am Navajo, Diné, Jemez, Pueblo, and Irish. So, and the biggest, I guess, land acknowledgements for the first one, Diné, since I live on the Navajo Nation. It's really beautiful here, and I'm really thankful for God's creation. And so with the creation insight is coming off of last week's Good Medicine Way with the first baby laugh of Jesus. Preston likes to knit. So he was about to do a project, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, we need help with this dryer. So why not just throw the yarn in there? And it got messed up pretty bad. So now, now we have to recreate the ball of yarn, and tangled mess. So, and what's funny is that the kitten that we have wanted to help us, and so when we were still going through it, she came in and started chewing on the yarn. We're like, "Oh, you're trying to help? You're not helping. You're tearing up the yarn now." So she broke the yarn. And then it just reminded me like how God uses broken things, and he creates new things out of what was once broken. So that was one of the things that I thought about, and it brought a lot of joy and laughter because she really thought she wasn't helping fix the ball of yarn. She did not. So shout out to my kitty. And that is it for the creation insight. Anyone else want to share?
All right, well, got a couple announcements this week. The first one is we're just starting this week a book by Thomas King that was recommended by Darlene Silversmith. It's called The Inconvenient Indian, and it's like a darkly humorous look at kind of Canadian settler legends from the white folks to what the Indians' perspective on all of that history, the First Nations people up there is. So that'll begin. All ladies are invited to come every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll be starting this Wednesday. And the second announcement is from Heather Withrow about Wechoni.
Good evening, everybody. We had the great pleasure of attending the Wechoni family virtual camp on Saturday. And for John and me, this was our second opportunity to attend the virtual camp. And it actually, Wechoni has this really special place in our heart is because it's what led us to Good Medicine Way with Casey's invitation to start attending back in August. And so this past Wednesday, it was a time of encouragement with different relatives across the Turtle Island, just sharing together. There's great humor in the group and just a connection between people who have had face-to-face time and are really missing it, but also just time to come together and just share and be blessed. And there's going to be more opportunities, everybody, because they've had such a good response. There's going to be 3 more this year: May 1st, July 31st, and also November 13th. People can come together for Wachoni. So put those dates on your calendar. They are Saturdays in the afternoon usually, and it's just a time, again, to come together and appreciate Creator, appreciate one another, and be loved well. I think that's what I really appreciate about that time.
Right. Thank you. I have one announcement. Just in the last couple days here, we sing songs from Cheryl Bear. But last week she called me and we had a long conversation, and she got to the point why she called, and it was to invite me to consider coming on the board of Indigenous Pathways. And that's the group that is a conglomeration of 3 organizations, and I would be a board member of that. So I talked with the chair of the committee and with Terry LeBlanc, and I agreed to be a board member with Indigenous Pathways. You can check them out. You can look at them on the internet. Also, it's part of NAITS, acronym NAIITS, our academic side. But I will be on as much as I can, and they gave me a lot of leeway. That I told them that the church plant here in Albuquerque is primary, and that if I need to be here instead of there, that church plant comes first. Kind of like family. You put family first before any other kind of thing in your life, to take care of that, and then go back to other things. So they've agreed, and if things develop to where I can't give full time to Indigenous Pathways, they agreed to make a new category that with some other folks to come on and as an advising elder. And I'm almost to that point here now. Being considered an elder, I got the gray hair to go with it, so I thought that would be fine. So that's my announcement.
All right. Well, Preston, would you like to read Creator's words to us?
Are we actually unmuted now?
Yep.
Yes, we are. What? Sorry, trying to get everything all situated because I going from one device to the next. So we're reading from Matthew 5. When Creator sets free, Jesus saw this great crowd. He went back up to the mountainside and sat down to teach the people. His followers came to him there. So he took a deep breath. Opened his mouth and began to share his wisdom, and then teach them how to see Creator's good road. Creator, his blessing rests on the poor, the ones with broken spirits, the good road from above in their walk. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who walk a trail of tears, for he will wipe the tears from their eyes and comfort them. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who walk softly in the humble manner. The earth, land, and sky will welcome them and always be their home. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who hungers and thirst for wrongs to be made right again. They will eat and drink until they are full. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who are merciful and kind to others. Their kindness will find its way back to them, full circle. Creator's blessing rests on the pure of heart, for they are the ones who will see Great Spirit. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who make peace. It will be said of them, they are the children of the Great Spirit. Greatest blessing rests on the ones who are hunted down and mistreated for doing what is right, for they are walking the good road from above. Others will lie about you, speak against you, and look down on you with scorn and corrupt, but all because you walk the road with me. This is the sign that greatest blessing is resting on you. So let your heart be glad and jump for joy, for you will be honored in the world above. You are like the prophet of old, who are treated in the same way by your ancestors. Salt and light. As you walk in the good road with me, you are the salt of the earth, bringing cleaning and healing to all. Salt is a good thing, but if it loses its saltiness, how will it get its flavor back? That kind of salt has no worth and is thrown out. As you walk up the road with me, you are a light shining in the dark world. A village built on the hill cannot be hidden. No one hides a torch under the blanket. Instead, it is lifted up high on a pole, so all who are in the house can see it. In the same way, let your light be shine by doing what is good and right. When others see, they will give honor to your Father, the one above us all. Fulfill the sacred teachings. When you hear my words, you may think I have come to undo the law given by John from the water, Moses, and the word of prophet.
Looks like we might have lost connection there with them.
I can
Sure.
I can pick up.
Leah can finish up the
We can still
passage.
hear you.
Oh, you're still there. Okay.
We can't hear you finish your reading.
Okay, you can still hear me.
Go for it.
Okay. But I have come to honor them and show everyone their true meaning. I spoke from my heart. As long as there is a sky above and an earth below, not even the smallest thing will have said will fade away until everything they have said has found its full meaning and purpose. Anyone who turns away from these instructions and tells others to do the same will be looked down on as a small one. On Creator's good road from the world above, but the ones who do them and teach others to do the same, they will look up to as great ones. I will say to you, unless you have better reputation, then the scroll keepers and the separated ones, Pharisees, you will not find a path that leads to the land of the Creator's good road above. Creator set free, Jesus then began to help the people see how the full meaning and purpose of the law and the prophets apply to them. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to say a little prayer for the word we're about to hear, and then I'll let Monica do her own protocol and background and introduce her talk, and she'll take it away from there. I am really excited that Monica could be with us tonight. Don't know her super well, but I got to hear her speak at the NATES conference, and that was really great. And that was kind of a crazy time for me because I had a graduate level class going on, and I was working on a paper that had to do with using restorative justice in a public health context to combat issues and health disparities on the reservation. So after I heard her talk and I found out that she was a nurse herself, I hit her up for some of her wisdom and knowledge and experience, and it got a good grade on that paper. So thank you, Monica. And and all right, so let's go into prayer here. Dear Creator, we just thank you so much for this time to be together. And we thank you so much that Monica could join us tonight and share some wisdom. Pray that you would really guide her words for what we need to hear, and that you would help us to all have open hearts for that word to take root and to see how we can apply it in our day-to-day lives. In the name of Creator Sets Free, amen. And take it away, Monica.
Oh, can you mute?
Amen and hi. Okay, so I gotta pull this up. So Leah, can I get you to put a share? Do I have a share screen? I do have a share screen. Okay, here we go. There we go. So before I start, I'll acknowledge the land. So I live on Algonquin territory, which is along the Ontario-Quebec border of Canada. And this area is called the Ottawa Valley now. But there used to be different names for the different land features here that the different Algonquin nations would give them. And I'm very grateful to the many different Algonquin nations who live here, who've been caretaking this land for centuries upon centuries, who make it possible for other people to be able to live here today. And there's also other Indigenous diaspora living in this area as well, including Inuit and Cree. And the land that raised me was Central Alberta, which is Treaty 7. The signatories to Treaty 7 are the Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nations. And Treaty 7 is also home to the Métis Nation Region 3. And today is actually Louis Riel Day. I don't know if that is relevant for any of the Americans in the room, but it's a huge day for the province of Manitoba, especially in Canada, because Louis Riel's mobilization for Métis land rights led to the creation of the province of Manitoba, among other important events. So that's what's happening today. And as mixed race diaspora, I spent some time trying to figure out how to introduce myself, because I've learned that Turtle Island people often will introduce their nation relationships, their clan or family relationships, and their traditional land base. So to that end, I had some extended family who still speak our Indigenous language help me create an introduction, which is this. Ngai ho pulung numita, si Monica han, pungangan ako, si han, mama ako, ina hawi si Lynette, upansa ako, I pataanay ku niaro ipini I kalengko I Taiwan, I paswali ay nu Taiwan ku kaseniaro ay nupansa. And that means, in what is probably not a very good accent, hello everyone, my name is Monica, daughter of Han. My parents are Han and Lynette. I am a Bansa person, and my tribal village is Bataan in the greater Hualien area on the central east coast of Taiwan, and the traditional territory of the Bansa is up and down the east coast of the country of Taiwan. And I'm descended from the Bansa people on my dad's maternal side. So here's a geographical context for Taiwan and the Bantu people. So there's on the top is the um, location of Taiwan in relation to East Asia. And the Bantu people are one of the people groups that are called Austronesians. And depending on which scholar, some will say the Austronesians originated in Taiwan and migrated out to all those other locations. Others say that the Austronesians had a different origin point. But I think what's amazing about the Austronesians is the sheer breadth of how far that they, like how many different areas they covered. Like I mean, it's a solid third of the entire globe. So, so they really got far. And they're related also to Pacific peoples like the Hawaiians, the indigenous peoples of Papua New Guinea and Indonesia, as well as the Maoris of New Zealand or Aotearoa. In fact, Hawaiian language and the Bantu language have the same word for number 5, which is lima. So Bantu is what the people use to refer to themselves, and then Amis or Ame Zu is what other people tend to call them. On the left is a picture of my family when I was very young, decked out in some traditional regalia, and there's me on the far right, very small and looking very morose for whatever reason. Maybe I missed my nap that day. And then on the right, so Taiwan, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but Taiwan has a big spine of mountains towards the eastern side. And then on the western side, is the plains and flatlands. And many of the tribes that had traditional territory in the flatlands are no longer distinct as peoples. But that's not to say that some of them may not be able to come back one day, because I saw that happen with the Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia. So if the Mi'kmaq can come back from being legally declared extinct, I don't see why that's not possible in Taiwan also. But the Amis, I tend to use Amis and Bantu interchangeably. The Amis territory that is traditionally that we traditionally lived on is on the eastern coast of Taiwan, right next to the ocean, along with this mountain valley. And the Amis are one of 16 currently officially federally recognized tribes, and there are other tribes in Taiwan that are currently advocating to achieve federal recognition. Taiwan has been, I'm going to go back for a second. Taiwan has been through several colonial regimes since the 1600s. First the Dutch, then different Chinese dynasties, and then the Japanese from 1895 to 1949. And that's the era in which my grandmother grew up. And then the Chinese Nationalist Party take over after the end of World War II. So during these many rounds of colonization, there was a loss of traditional territory, indigenous spiritualities were made illegal, there's use of indigenous languages in school was forbidden, and there was violent suppression of resistance to regimes with many casualties among indigenous peoples. But I didn't know about any of that until I was an adult. These are my other family. My dad's paternal side is Mennonite, hence the name Friesen, which is my maiden name. And the Mennonites fled Holland in the 1500s due to religious persecution. They migrated all over Europe, and then eventually some of them settled in Canada and the US. And my mom is a proud Hakka woman, and the Hakka are a linguistically distinct group among the Han Chinese. They have their own language dialect, and they were pushed out of northern China, and now they live in a diaspora all over the world. And my mom's particular family are all from Singapore, and we don't have any direct ties to mainland China. So there's a history of displacement in one form or another in all of my family lineages. So when I grew up in Calgary in central Alberta, I saw my dad as a white physician because that's how he looked physically and that's how he worked and lived. But since my mother was my primary caregiver, I was raised to be culturally Chinese. And every 4 years or so, we would also go visit the Singaporean relatives. So I learned a lot of social conventions of being Chinese, including filial piety, obedience to my parents, a more reserved demeanor, studying school very dutifully, and aspiring to be a doctor slash lawyer slash engineer slash accountant. I also read growing up the Book of Tao and the writings of Confucius, and sometimes we would also visit our Mennonite family in Saskatchewan and BC. And sometimes I'd read books on Anabaptist and Mennonite history, which my Auntie Lou would send to us. So while I was being raised, I was well informed about what it meant to be Hakka and what it meant to be Mennonite. But the Indigenous side was a bit of a large blank. We did not visit or contact these relatives on any regular basis. Um, so apart from that trip when I was really small, I was 4 years old, we didn't see these family or travel to Taiwan again until I was 16. And this was my first remembered trip to my grandma's home country. And this picture is a traditional dance rehearsal in her home village. And this is the first trip where I was old enough to recognize how culturally distinct my grandma's family were from my mom's Chinese family, because even though they spoke Mandarin, a Chinese dialect, the same as my Singaporean relatives, they were boisterous and unreserved. They valued sports over school. They gave more autonomy to their children. They expressed affection with more physicality. And even their food was different. They ate different food. So I realized that this family, my dad's family, they really were not Chinese. And when I went back to Canada and I visited my grandma later that same summer, I looked at her and for the first time consciously realized that she is Indigenous. She's not Chinese. I'd always previously thought of her as Chinese. And so this prompted the question, well, what does that make me? So I went back to Taiwan again when I was 18 to study Mandarin, because I only spoke a few words of Mandarin growing up. And I remember flying in and seeing the night lights of Taipei, the capital city, spread out below me, and having this peculiar feeling that this place that I'd barely ever visited before was somehow welcoming me home. But being an expat was a very peculiar experience there, because my sense of physically belonging was often contradicted by how other people related with me, because I was singled out by the Chinese locals as a foreigner because of my white appearance and my Canadian accent. But I was a lot more Asian in appearance and culture than most of my expat classmates. And I spent most of my non-school days fulfilling social obligations and going on outings with my Amis family. So my expat friends and I did not actually have a ton of activities in common. And I never felt like I truly belonged to either the Chinese locals or the expats. But whenever I was with my Amis family, they just told me I was Amis like them, and they left it at that. They emphasized the hereditary ties that we shared, instead of pinpointing the things that made me racially different, which is what most people in situations have emphasized in my life until that point. Because in Canada, I'm not identified as a fellow Caucasian by other Caucasian people. And among Chinese people, even with somewhat credible Mandarin speaking skills now, people still always identify me as other, either as Canadian or as Hunxue, which is half blood. But to my Taiwanese family, being part Amis meant I was fully Amis. They didn't care about blood quantum. And perhaps it's because they've lived so much of their lives being excluded by others that it has grown in them a compassion to emphasize inclusion over exclusion when it comes to Indigenous identity. And when I traveled through Taiwan's beautiful mountains, I had the profound sense, not that they belong to me, but that I belong to them. So much so that on one trip, I actually cried as we went back down the mountain because I was so sad to leave and go back to the city. And I never understood what Indigenous people in Canada meant about a spiritual connection to land until I went back to Ami's ancestral land and felt this connection for myself. And I thought then, and I still do, think of the Taiwanese mountains as these ancient, strong matriarchs who recognized me for who I was when I stepped foot among them. And to me, this connects to the matrilineal organization of traditional Ami society, as well as their cosmology, in which the sun and other significant entities of nature are female. There's a very different concept of femininity and strength in Ami's culture than there is in Western culture. And if the mountains were our mother, our original mother, they were also the protector for the Amis because they protected us from colonial encroachment geographically, from the west of Taiwan to the east, because they were harsh environments in which it was hard for colonialists to send soldiers. My grandma, in a very rare storytelling moment, said that her father and many other indigenous people who had had high rank in the Japanese bureaucracy before the end of the war were then targets of the Chinese Nationalist Party's government once the Japanese were defeated in World War II. And so they literally hid in the mountains and survived there using their traditional knowledge of the land in order to avoid execution by the Chinese Nationalist Party. I knew very little of this socio-political history at the time I was actually living in Taiwan, but I spent a lot of time with my Amis family in the Taiwanese countryside, near and in Grandma's ancestral village, and they took me to many events with songs and traditional celebrations. And on one occasion, they took me to a farm where a large mountain pig was butchered, and a ton of our family were all invited, and everybody had this giant pig feast together. And because my Mandarin language skills at the time were still not very good, I didn't realize it at the time. But when my mother spoke to my aunties later, she learned that this pig feast was actually held in my honor, and that the family had been deciding whether they wanted to go through the effort of this pig feast. And then the oldest family matriarch insisted on butchering this pig in order to celebrate my coming to visit the family and to celebrate my coming home. And I will never forget this gesture of complete love, acceptance, and belonging from my relatives who had barely or never known me until that point. And they replaced my chronic sense of displacement with a sense of connection and belonging. In the midst of this acceptance and belonging given to me by my Indigenous family, it also began to become clear to me how little acceptance and belonging my family was given by Taiwanese society at large. I bore witness to my family's daily struggle with the realities of racism. Indigenous people had to work a lot harder for economic and social success, and they had much less respect from society than the average Chinese Taiwanese person. And in contrast, at the exact same time, I was treated well wherever I went. I was covered by this weird awe and admiration of being North American, of being foreign. And people never shunned me and they never looked down on me. They would just do that to my family instead, my blood relatives, and I would watch like a fly on the wall. And I realized that now that my North American whiteness was a buffer to my indigeneity. And essentially, what protected me from racism in Taiwan was my white privilege. Well, returning to Canada after this experience was very disorienting because I knew that in Canada, my life was free from this kind of racism, always had been, and would continue to be. And so when I reflect on how confused I felt at the time, I can see I carried a certain amount of survivor guilt out of Taiwan. Because as I started making relationships with Indigenous people in Canada, I could see how much racism affected their lives too. And though I felt a much stronger tie to an Indigenous identity after my time in Taiwan than I previously had, I often wondered if it was okay for me to take on an Indigenous identity when I had never suffered the challenges that usually come with it. So as I was working through these things in the beginning years of my university degree, I experienced an enormous amount of support from Indigenous friends and non-blood family that I was getting to know. I was supported by many Cree aunties and grandmothers who encouraged me to be comfortable being Indigenous. They also taught me how to bead, how to work with leather and eagle feathers, and how to use a sewing machine to make other traditional crafts. And my Mi'kmaq friend, Matt LeBlanc, helped me understand that if I was mixed race, I could still be Indigenous. And I was also encouraged by his father, Papa Terry, whose face I'm sure many of you recognize in that center picture. And as I've come to know them, Indigenous people in Canada have so often accepted me into their communities and truly treated me like family. And my Bansa family as well continued to support me across the long miles with their likes and their positivity on social media and their practical support. Many years after, when I got married, some of my aunties painstakingly sewed that regalia for me and sent it across the Pacific for me to wear at my wedding. And I'm wearing a little bit here today. In that middle picture, my great auntie wearing the fur scarf is teaching some traditional Amis dance at my wedding reception. And then on the bottom right is grandma and me. And if it takes a village to raise a child, it took several villages, diasporas, cultures, and indigeneities to raise me. And who I am today is because of everything that they have done for me. So I'd like to talk a little bit about journeys in reconciliation. I know it's quite a buzzword these days, but it's one of the most complex conversations I think Canada is having right now. Well, my grade school education had minimal education on Indigenous people, so I grew up thinking of them as a vague group of people who seemed to go through a lot of hardship, but who are largely situated in the past. But as I made more and more friendships, got involved with Treaty 6 and other communities at iEmergence Kids Culture Camp, my views were challenged. Culture Camp has become a home fire and a grounding place and space for me. In its current form, it's a partnership between InterVarsity Pioneer Camps Alberta and iEmergence, which is which is part of the Family at Indigenous Pathways, to serve Indigenous kids aged 8 to 12 for a week in culture reclamation, cultivation of joy, and exploration of self and community love, and a safe space to explore relationship with Creator. It was founded by Terry and Bev LeBlanc, and over the years, our camp elders have included Ray Aldred, Harold Rocher, Nora Yellowknee, and of course, Terry and Bev. Culture Camp is deeply committed to the children we reach, but it's also been a uniquely formational place for many staff, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Staff are trained before the campers arrive in some of the social and historical contexts of Indigenous people in Canada. They're trained in trauma-informed practice, and they're given some education on Indigenous worldviews before the kids even arrive. And because it's a safe space for discussion and exploration, even after the kids arrive, and especially after they are asleep at night, there are inevitably these long conversations about culture, about race relations, reconciliation, and decolonization amidst Christian faith. And these conversations are not forced, but happen organically because of the community environment, such as the one you see on the far right, where we, the Moccasin Fairies, are working very hard to finish the camper crafts before the last day of camp. And we work, live, dream, and talk together as a multi-ethnic community committed to practical expressions of decolonization and reconciliation. Because sometimes reconciliation is as simple as helping a child finish sewing their moccasins. And over the years, the community of Indigenous followers of Jesus that I live, love, and dream with has grown into new circles. I met the other folks at Nate's, the Salvation Army folks at Nwachoni at the Pine Lake Powwow, which I have this feeling after reading Casey's book that basically he just like took Wachoni Family Camp and then just like poof, put another one in Canada. Uh, and there are many other Indigenous peoples with a vision, love, and commitment to following Creator Sets Free. And as you can see, Papa Terry keeps popping up in all these pictures, as well as a few others, such as Jagabigwe Diane, who's over here beside Danny Zacharias there, and Joshua Grace, and as well as my good friend Jordan Morton in the red ribbon shirt. And I began to realize that although I was attending a specific church in my city on Sunday mornings, In reality, I was attending 2 churches because this community is also my church, even though it's not usually happening in a building that is called a church. Um, Meanwhile, in my academic life as a registered nurse, I had discovered the concepts of culture safety, which were developed by Maori nurse scholar Irahapeti Ramsden. Now, I'll let you just read over some of those quotations, which so moved me when I first read them. And it's because I could see how her discussion of power and who controlled the healthcare narrative is relevant to Indigenous health in Canada as well, because I felt that Indigenous people were not being given the power to tell their own stories, teach their own understanding of health and resilience in Indigenous health. And Irahapeti Ramsden actively worked for structural and individual ways to return power back to the patient and especially back to Indigenous patients. So reading Irahapeti Ramsden's work helped me put together the things I was experiencing, all that confusion, and draw something meaningful out of it, because I had a sense of physical displacement, being descended from settlers and immigrants and being a visible minority in almost every region of the world. I have an emotional displacement in feeling like I don't fit in anywhere, and a mental and spiritual displacement coming to terms with a new Indigenous identity as a mixed race person. And through reading Ramsden's work and through the love and acceptance of my Indigenous family in Taiwan and the support of my Indigenous community in Canada, I was able to transform my sense of chronic displacement into a motivation to serve the Indigenous peoples whose lives I meet and will meet, and improve their experience in Jesus following communities, as well as at my job in healthcare. And I am motivated by the pain and the gratitude of my life experiences and the experiences of people I love to serve Indigenous people in as many aspects of my life as possible. And so with that, this is a brief snapshot of my unexpected, surprising, hectic, and ultimately uplifting journey into Indigenous health, nursing, education, and decolonization. In 2018 and 2019, I was given the opportunity to put some of the reconciliation ideas that I had about changing the training of healthcare professionals into action. And so all of the folks at the forefront of this image, of this photo, are my previous nursing students who were attending a vigil for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. As Kids Culture Camp, to me, is a living example of a community that can nurture people who actively participate in reconciliation. I tried to bring a lot of the aspects of camp into this nursing school setting, hence all these folks sitting around a table crafting once again. And I tried in my classes to make a similar space for hard conversations and the kind of life-giving and life-changing discussion and collaboration that makes Culture Camp such a powerful community. And then on the right, there's my next semester students posing outside the vigil window that they helped to decorate. This is the Unfinished Moccasins initiative. This is also for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit. And there's the University of Calgary Indigenous Student Circle Chief in the center, smiling through the window with us. And in 4 months, the students gained a lot of capacity to build positive relationships with the Indigenous communities around them. And it showed me how much everyday folks can be equipped to engage in truth and reconciliation and culture safety, even in a short time like 4 months, if they have the appropriate guidance and opportunity. And I really hope to continue this kind of work at some point in the future. But of course, the pandemic brought all of that to a grinding halt. So instead, we all took it online, just like we're doing tonight. So our team put together a virtual Kids Culture Camp in 2020 through Facebook and Zoom. We mailed out camper packages to different communities, and we had some campers join us live on Facebook and Zoom to pray, sing, dance, and craft together. And our team is hoping to refine our technology and virtual camp skills for our upcoming virtual Culture Camp 2021. And we're also hoping to maintain a little Indigenous humor with our social media content. And here is Native InterVarsity. Turn on. Yeah. So this is Native InterVarsity. I met Native InterVarsity through the NATES online symposium in 2020, because it was actually the first time that a large contingent of students from Native InterVarsity had been able to attend NATES, because in the past the physical travel had actually been a barrier for them. And so we created group chats, and we started hanging out in university staff workers like Zoom rooms after all the NATE sessions were already over. And then we enjoyed each other's company so much that we kept on meeting weekly, even after the NATE symposium had ended. And Jakai would know a little bit about that. And so we call this the Gathering, and the Gathering has been a sacred space for us to come together from all over Turtle Island, as well as sometimes Australia. And we pray, sing, and study Creator's Word together. And we've continued monthly gatherings as well as weekly smaller circle groups. And I attended the Native InterVarsity Would Jesus Eat Fry Bread conference, which was also online. And I had the honor and privilege there of being commissioned to create an art piece for one of the Native InterVarsity community leaders, which is the medallion you see on the bottom right. And this particular medallion brings together different styles of beadwork that I've learned from elders at Culture Camp, as well as Indigenous millennials on Instagram, as well as the loom style of beadwork, bead looming, that I was taught in Taiwan by one of my Indigenous aunties. So the Native InterVarsity logo is in the middle, and then around it, I added a border of the Pata'an village tribal colors, which are the red, the white, and the black, with the neon green accents. So that's the reason for the color scheme of this medallion. And I was very happy to learn that this medallion had just arrived to its recipient, InterVarsity staff leader Makaiza Tongkanui in Hawaii. And to me, I talking about this medallion because I feel like I put into it like all the things that I am, which was all these different influences from different Indigenous communities who've chosen to privilege me with some kind of participation or belonging in their community, and impart some of their teachings to me, which is why the middle part has, my family heritage style of beadwork, as well as beadwork from different people across Turtle Island who have gifted me with that knowledge. So just like how in myself, I don't feel like I can really separate all these different influences in my life. I chose to put them all into one medallion. And I know that that's not always considered protocol depending on who you ask. But I'm doing my best to navigate different teachings and different learnings, as somebody who is always sitting along the borders of different cultures. So in conclusion, it's been a real honor to be part of so many different life-giving Indigenous communities, as well as to witness the cross-pollination between them. And I hope that as we continue on into a very uncertain and constantly shifting future, that the love, faith, and humor of these communities will continue to be the foundation that keeps us resilient and following Creator's path. And thank you, Arai, very much for listening to my story. And if you're nerdy, you can look up Ramsden online.
That was very nice, Monica. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's been quite a journey for you, I can tell. And I know, and I have met many like you who have journeyed to find their roots, their culture, their belonging sometimes that is missing in many people's lives, especially those that have been taken away from their communities and families. It's good to reconnect. I had the privilege of growing up in my community and not being moved. My tribe was one of the only tribes in Michigan, family groups, not to be relocated to Kansas, because we, with our leaders, took it on ourselves to make connections. And as they would say, we played the game. We played the game of accepting, adopting the culture, the language, the farming, sending our kids to school and going to church so that we remained in our area. But what was a constant is that our cultural values never changed, even though we walked this facade of living in another world. But Christianity became a part of our lives as we continued along that path. And that's where my journey came into. So I'd like to open it up right now to anyone who'd like to offer a question or comment to Monica now. Just unmute yourself and state your question.
Monica, it was awesome getting to meet you at Nate's and then being in Native InterVarsity with you for 6 months already or so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've managed to stir up a lot of trouble despite the fact that none of us have ever met each other in person.
Yeah. And then going to all these different conferences is awesome too.
Great.
So the beautiful pictures and the story, such a common thread of cultures rejecting people from their own, and then the other side of the culture accepting people, and the journey that we have to go through to find our own self-identity. And it seems like you're searching for a real balance of your cultures, and I think it's been fascinating. And again, your pictures were so beautiful, and your artwork is from your heart. I enjoyed it.
Thanks very much.
Are the couple there, Wayne and Rachel, are they part of your friendship circle there? Well, Wayne and Rachel, can you comment?
Hi, yeah, I would love to. Yeah, thanks so much for letting us join. I just became part of the Good Medicine Way Facebook group and then was able to jump in today. Heard about you folks from, I think Sue Martell is your name, right? I just met Sue during the Week in Waitoni conference. And Monica, I met you, Casey, at Nate's 2017 and enjoyed your book as well after that. And so really grateful to see you again. But yeah, this is my fiance, Wayne. And anyway, I met Monica also at the Nate's group. We had a Nate's chat group and we didn't actually, I think, ever sit in a room together like this, but we had a private conversation on Facebook and I was just asking questions about Indigenous Taiwanese culture because I was raised in Taiwan as a foreigner, and my fiance was also raised in Taiwan. And so when I found out that we had this opportunity here from you, Monica, I was really excited and really wanted to hear your story. So thank you, because it's so precious and also beautifully communicated. I can tell you put so much time and work into the presentation, but even more into the life that was lived, and also honoring so many voices on the journey is really beautiful to hear. I also was just on a call with Makaiba, who received your medallion that you showed us, and she was like, "Oh, I was so touched by that gift." So Makaiba is my colleague as well in InterVarsity. But yeah, I think for me, like hearing your talk, I really resonated with that disorientation of culture. And my story's a bit different, being a person of European heritage, second generation raised in Asia, and trying to figure out what that means. But I think I really appreciate that intersection of being so racially mixed, as well as living in a different land from those peoples, as well as being from an Indigenous community that you're reconnecting with, and how you also by God's guidance have lived into that in like being a blessing in the land where you're now living as a guest, and really contributing. There's so many layers. I loved it. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing there, Rachel.
I wrote Makaiva like a 4-page letter
Oh,
with that medallion. So I'm pretty impressed if she actually read the whole thing. But a lot
I'm
of it
sure
was
she
about
did.
a lot of it was about like Pacifica peoples, actually, because at the height of the gatherings at Mauna Kea, a singer-songwriter from Hataan village was actually there. Like I saw pictures of her there. So
Oh,
it really it made me realize, the strength of Pacific peoples, that the ocean connects all of them,
mhm.
even though they're all so spread apart. And so there's a real sense, I think, of like Pacifica solidarity or identity that I'm still figuring out. But one of the things that helped me see it was Mauna Kea.
That has been such a beautiful catalyst, I think, for many of us. Yeah. I also got to write my dissertation about that movement and some of our ohana there that have been standing for what is right and just in Jesus' name in that place. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Monica, that it was just really amazing listening to you, how you've taken time to learn the different parts and then to go back in and meet your family and to allow them the space to even honor you. The story of the pig and the elder coming and just doing that was just so beautiful. But they couldn't have done that if you hadn't gone to explore and to go and put yourself in a place to learn that, and then to come back here into Canada as the other Canadian here on this. Our country needs you. And oh, you guys are too. Okay, I don't. And we were at Pine Lake together, though we didn't actually ever have a conversation because I recognized the dance with probably the bottle of water or potato, depending on which year. Doing something there. My husband where the circle too is. So. Yes, yeah, okay, yeah. I didn't know. Usually I hadn't. Where are you guys? I don't know where Wayne and Rachel are from. I'm in Edmonton, so I'm on Treaty 6, but from Saskatchewan. But anyways, just the beauty of what you're doing, and just how you shared that so graciously. But really, the story of the elder who took the time and said, that they would give of their best for you is really that underlying of what it is that we're talking about here at the Good Medicine Way. And I was just really blessed. So thank you for sharing that story.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the crazy part is she didn't even know if I understood what it meant. Like, well, obviously I didn't at the time. I didn't know what it meant. And she did it anyway. Like, it was, I don't know, I mean, she's a pretty, she's the, I mean, I think she's basically the head of our family back there. Well, there's a couple different women who kind of hold everything together and hold a lot of the knowledge, and she's definitely one of them.
Go ahead, Namar.
Yes, Monica, I want to sincerely thank you for sharing, and thank you for your journey. It's a great inspiration to us and to many more. It will be to many more. And my question for you is, as you went on your journey, I like to call it, you went on your pilgrimage, if you will accept that, if that's okay. When you had went on to your pilgrimage, going through that journey, did it ever make you feel inferior, not knowing where you truly belong as you were learning where you belong? Like, have you ever felt inferior, and did others make you feel inferior because of that? Or did they say you were inferior because of that?
Well, I think one of the most disorienting things was going to Taiwan and being treated like I was superior because of being white. Because in Canada, nobody interacts with me, you know, like I'm white. Like I think in the mainstream consciousness, um, like being, it's like, so I experience it more as like exclusionary versus inclusionary. So I think I've had a lot of experiences where people interact with me in an exclusionary way, to be like, well, I have specific memories of times in school where I would say like, oh, well, you know, being white, and like my grandpa who grew up on a homestead in Saskatchewan, and my classmates would be like, what? You're not white, you're Asian. Like, what are you talking about? And just like no concept that you could be both.
Mhm.
Um, and then the same thing would happen when I talk to Chinese people. And that even if I speak in Mandarin to them, and maybe, you know, maybe Jakai would know something about this, but that they would be like, they wouldn't be like, oh, are you Chinese? They'll always be like, stare at me for a while, looking kind of perplexed, and then be like, you must be half-blooded. It's
Mm.
like, so like the first thing that they'll emphasize is that, oh, well, there's some part of you that isn't white. There's some part of you that isn't Chinese. And that was a very common experience growing up. And I don't think it was, so people weren't like directly racist towards me, but there were a common experience of kind of this passive aggressive, exclusionary perspective in how people related to me. And my my Amis family just totally didn't care about that. They're interested in what made us the same, not what made us different.
Mm.
Great. We got another comment or?
Yeah, someone on Facebook, Summer Noel Graham, says she loves how you used crafts like from KCC in your workplace. So beautiful. Reconciliation can be as simple as finishing a pair of moccasins for a kid together.
Yeah, my favorite story about that from Culture Camp is this guy named Kristen Mark Westwood. I don't know if any of you know him, but he and I were at camp together for many years. His family is kind of your very standard, you know, Euro Canadian, but he was really committed to camp. And I remember this one time where him and his youngest camper was tiny, like you're supposed to be 8, but like this kid is probably 7 and just kind of snooked his way in there. Um, and he was so small that he couldn't even reach the pedals on the sewing machine. And so Kristen took this child on his lap during a spot of free time, and they were like sewing away at the machine together. And you know, Kristen's got like his hands around the child's hands to guide the piece of art through the sewing machine. And to me, that's like such a living example of reconciliation, where like it's just this random white guy and he's helping this tiny indigenous child reconnect to his culture, and they're kind of just doing it without barely even thinking about it, you know, and that child will always have a memory of this person who really cared about him and cared about who he was and helping him reconnect to who he was. And he may not even remember his name later, but just like he's going to have an image that that's possible, you know, that different ethnicities can come together and make that possible. And when I struggle to, you know, the reconciliation is a messy process. You hit a lot of hurdles, a lot of curveballs, a lot of bends in the road. So when I get discouraged, I think back to camp and be like, I know this is possible because I've seen it happen. Therefore, it can happen again.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Monica. It's been such a pleasure to have you on here, and I look forward to meeting and working with you in the future. Indigenous Pathways. I'll probably get to Kids Culture Camp in a couple years from now. But we'll look forward to the work that you do. I know you're going to be quite a leader as you continue to grow. And I call you my little daughter, like I have so many that are out there. Just good to have you amongst us here. Thank you so much for sharing. So we want to turn it over to Fly. It's going to be our song here from the Grovers.
All right.
Child of the King, we are one tribe, we are the remnant, born of the Word, Spirit and fire, we are warriors. Breath of life fills me, brings the rain, brings the fire. Wind of life takes me, brings a change, lift me higher, and we'll fly with you. Lord, be our wings, we'll fly with you. Up where the eagles sing, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. And with the eagles sing, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. Lord of the earth, bring the rain, bring the harvest. The season has come to raise the pine to your honor. Word of life, we praise you, we bless your name, for it is holy. From the hills, Yahweh, we will sing, return to glory, and we'll fly with you. Lord, be our wings, we'll fly with you. Up where the eagles sing, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. And with the eagles sing, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. Holy is the Lamb, and the King of Kings. Holy is the Lamb, and the King of Kings. Way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. And the King of Kings, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. Now with the eagles sing, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh. Up with the eagles sing, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, way ah hey ah, Yahweh.
Right, turning it over to Heather Witherow for the prayer time.
Creator, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the warmth and the friendship that is shared among us all, whether we're in Hawaii, whether we're up in Canada, whether we're in Turtle Island in the States, or anywhere else where people have joined in tonight. Lord, thank you that we are all together. And we just also just want to acknowledge Randy's word that, you know, as our creator, you created this place for all of us, regardless of where we were born. You created this world for us to share and to grow and to become whole in you. And so, Father, I just pray wherever we all are, whatever we're dealing with, that your peace rests upon us, your joy rests upon us, your love rests upon us. In fact, your blessing rests upon us. Thank you for Monica and her just graciousness and her word of hope, really, that she has seen connection happen regardless of where people come from. And that is possible. Maybe we take hold of that wholeness is possible regardless of where we all come from because of you. Thank you for that. Thank you for just the blessing of you. And we just take this opportunity to acknowledge you as our creator, as our Father, as our Spirit, as our Lord. I just pray that everyone has a great week. I pray everybody enjoys family time, their workspace, and that they see opportunities to share your love with others. In Jesus we pray, amen.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for the prayer. As we close right now, I really want to ask you to take a look at the Elohe Lenten service, Indigenous Lenten service. It is very unique. It's the introduction that Randy writes is very touching. I grew up as a young boy, no technology. I spent my time in nature, in the woods. I've always had German Shepherd dogs that were part of my life too, and I got one here now. But nature is so awesome. In Romans 8, it says we know that there is a God by what He has made, and take some time this week to take a walk, crunch in the snow, and feel the flakes fall on you, snowflakes. If the weather's nice there, walk along a stream and hear the brook and hear the birds. We don't take time. We live in our cities and our busyness. Every day I take 2 walks, one in the morning and one in the evening, and it's so refreshing to be out there and to feel the cold brisk on your face. And as we journey and we see animals and we see nature, and it's all part, we need to get a perspective. And that's what I see in his words. And as you reflect each day, there's something to read. It starts on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, we usually call it. And I would recommend that you burn some sage. Burn some sage and take those ashes. Take the ashes from there. And if you're in, some traditions to place it on your head. But I also had the vision of taking the ashes and also taking it and touching the back of your palm on each side where a hole was in Christ's hands, and also taking someone and put a little dab on your feet where the nails pierced our Savior, and smudge yourself with that sage and think of the creation that He made, because He also made us His greatest creation. So as we go, be the change that you want to see in the world. I love you all. And take care now. Everyone have a good week, and look forward to seeing you next Monday when we will be talking a little bit about this Lenten service, the Indigenous Lenten service.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks,
I'm going
Monica.
it.
You're going that, yeah.